You don't wake up dreaming of McDonald's fries. You wake up dreaming of McDonald's hash browns. McDonald's breakfast comes first. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Your data is like gold to hackers, and they'll sell it to the highest bidder. Are you protected? McAfee helps shield you, blocking suspicious texts, malicious emails, and fraudulent websites. McAfee Secure VPN lets you browse safely, and its AI-powered text scam detector spots threats instantly. You'll also get up to $2 million of award-winning antivirus and identity theft protection, all for just $39.99 for your first year. Visit McAfee.com. Cancel anytime. Terms apply.
Okay, if you have a teenager or preteen or toddler in your house, I guarantee you have had thoughts about how you're going to handle the teen years. It can be scary for a parent. I know even childless couples who just thinking about having a baby makes them nervous about how they're going to handle them as a teenager. Maybe it's because we remember those years ourselves and it was complicated, or maybe it's because we know there has to be a balance between having rules and giving our kids autonomy and freedom. And that balance point changes. And it's not clear cut. It's very confusing. Anyway, I'm no parenting expert, but I have one tip I like to share. I tell parents of preteens and teenagers to have lots of snacks at home and just stand in the kitchen with your mouth shut. And that is 90% of what you need to do to parent a teen well. The same thing goes for time in the car. Don't try to be cool, just drive them with your mouth shut and have snacks. And when your kid starts talking, and they will, first, do not judge them. And second, don't offer any advice. It's really, really hard not to give advice. So here's what I do. I paraphrase back to them what they said to me. Practice it today with any age child. It works really well. But this is only 90% of parenting a teen. The other 10% is really tricky. I know a guy who can help parents develop and keep a close and trusting relationship with their teen. His tips help with parenting kids of any age. His name is Tyler Durman, and he provides one-on-one coaching to parents. He's my go-to expert for parents who need to reset their relationship with their teens. And he's going to share his tips with us. I'm Dr. Wendy Hunter, and I'm the pediatrician next door. I'm that doctor friend you call for practical advice about your kids' health. I mix the science of medicine with the reality of parenting. Tyler Durman started his career as a teacher, and through his observations, he became a popular speaker to students. It was through his experience talking to over 4 million students that he gained insights that he shares with parents today. Here he explains.
In the beginning, I noticed that the students would stand in line in the gym or auditorium and kind of pull me aside, and they would say things to me like, "How could I tell you something that even my best friend doesn't know this?" And at first, of course, I thought I must have a special gift, like the teen whisperer or something. Then I figured out it's just because I don't know their friends, parents, or teachers, and I'm leaving town. And they've heard me for an hour, and they feel like they can trust me. We've laughed together. So they started opening up, and I became really surprised by the things I was hearing. It was amazing to me that the things that they were saying they needed from the adults in their lives were really different than what I had assumed. I had been a high school teacher and worked with kids in a local church program and thought I was up on it. But it's really through those conversations that they gave me a window into their world that few adults ever get to see. And so I started keeping track of it, documenting what I was learning for myself as a dad. Then eventually I realized in speaking to teachers, and from time to time in the beginning, they'd have me speak to parents. I thought, this could be helpful to other parents. And about 15, 18 years ago, I decided to shift my focus to really helping parents. I still speak to students, but that is really where all this content comes from.
The things that Tyler learned from teenagers was counterintuitive to what he expected. And he shares what he knows in his book, Counterintuitive, What 4 Million Teenagers Wished We Knew. We talked about what teenagers need from us and how to rebuild or build a trusting relationship. And he shared how teenagers are like barbecue chicken. Listen for that answer. What do teens need from adults?
Oh boy. Well, the number one thing I hear from teenagers the biggest thing they talk about are relationships. And the number one relationships they talk about, which was a surprise to me, is their relationship with their parents. And I thought it would be romance first or friendship first. But the biggest complaint they ever make is my parents don't listen to me. And I think as a dad, myself, we think we're doing a good job of listening because we love our kids and we care what they say. But as I began to think it through, and the more students I spoke to, and now I do coaching, I coach parents. It usually leads to me coaching kids. The depth to which that is a foundational principle of what their need is to feel seen and heard. And boy, I could talk about it forever. We think, at least I did, I think the biggest goal of parenting is, of course, to prepare them to live life without me. And so therefore, I need to get them to conform to what I know is best for them. But it's not about that. It begins with relationship. And relationship begins with listening. I feel like one of the greatest ways to show somebody we care is to truly listen to them. And to truly listen to somebody is hard work. Most of us aren't very good at it, although we may think we are. Now, I'm not suggesting that we listen to everything our kids say, especially when they're little, because, like Jake, our youngest, he would just talk and talk and talk. When it was him and I alone, he would, and me, it would just, and so you kind of, most of what they say when they're little is boring anyway. I remember I was at the sink once and I was rote listening, and he was like, Appa, they call me Appa because my wife is Korean. And he goes, Appa, are you listening to me? And I was like, oh crap, I'm not really listening to him. And then I realized, he said something about a red bicycle and that kid. So I said, oh yeah, no, I'm listening to you about that. You were talking about the red bike. And he's like, oh, okay, yeah. And he went on and on and on.
It's so complicated though, Tyler, because they have this stream of consciousness. It's like if you ask them after school what's going on, they say nothing, and then you tuck them into bed and there's this stream of consciousness and you're like, la, 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 yeah. And then all of a sudden in the middle of it, they tell you something like crucial. And
Absolutely.
It's so hard. Yes, you do have to listen, but you don't have to literally hear everything they say.
No, and I think as they get older.
And not feel guilty about that.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. We tend to live in a culture that worships our children, and we can talk about that a bit more, and where we are told by our culture, which has been lying to us for decades, I believe, we're being told by our culture that our value is in how happy our children are from moment to moment. And so we feel a huge pressure for that. But getting back to the listening, as they get older, I feel that and believe that we need to look for moments where we can tell, and those moments where they do all of a sudden share something that's deep or something that is important to them. I think that we all have these bad habits, things that get in the way of us listening well, particularly when they're preteens and teenagers, where we want to connect somewhere from 5 to 12 minutes based on research with them each day. That's enough for them to walk away going, oh, I've been seen, right?
Wow, 5 to 12 minutes.
Yeah,
Okay.
we used to, well, there's this old statistic before the year 2000 based on research that said families, and it still holds true, families that have 4 sit-down meals together a week, those kids are 4 times less likely to abuse substances in their 20s. Obviously, there's a connection piece to that. But then, parents, culturally, we felt like, none of us are doing that well, especially as they get older and we've got all these kids doing different things, sports, leadership, drama, dance, homework, whatever it is. And so they came back and they studied families, thousands of them that were actually having meals together. And they discovered that out of about 25 to 30 minutes of family dinner time, there was only 10 minutes of meaningful conversation. And the thing that surprised everyone was that of that 10 minutes, 7 minutes was the adults talking.
Oh, wow.
So there wasn't a lot of listening going on.
Yeah.
And so subsequently, we figured out that this listening, the thing that it does is it builds a foundation for a relationship so that when you later come into these discussions that are necessary about vaping or all of the things, the long list now that we are worried about before our kids become teenagers. If we've been listening and been as consistent as we can, without trying to be their best friend, without trying to keep them happy the whole time. But if they know that we see them and that we will really listen, it makes those conversations later so much better. And I often am working with parents who haven't really listened well, and the first step for them is to push a reset button and say, hey, I owe you an apology. There's something that I've been doing that isn't fair to you. I love you with my whole heart. I can say those words, but I just haven't been listening really well. I maybe, this list of bad habits, we interrupt our kids. Partly because we know what they're going to say, at least we think we do because we know them so well, and we want to jump in and fix it. I think that interrupting is a more aggressive form of ignoring. When you interrupt someone, you're sending a message saying what you're saying isn't important. You be quiet now because I've got something worth listening to.
Yeah. And
fixing it gets in the way. I have to work on that. Kristen's great. My wife is great at that.
Well, let me interrupt you to say this.
Okay.
That going back to that mealtime, and when parents are dominating the conversation with their young kids at the table, at least the kids are seeing back and forth communication. So that's a great time to set that foundation of listening to your partner, even if you're talking most of the time.
Absolutely. That's good.
I even talk about that 5 to 12 minutes a day. We've got toddlers have a new baby in the house and they're acting up, right? So all they really need is one-on-one time with their parents, very young years, 5 to 12 minutes a day with complete attention, right? Not interrupting and doing what the child wants to do, which I know I've heard you talk about before is meeting your child where they're at and doing the activities that they enjoy, not the ones that you dictate.
Right.
But it's interesting that we do measure our worth based on how happy our children are. And that doesn't always serve their best interests long-term in terms of their development, them being happy all the time.
Absolutely not. I think the number one thing that I find with families who have teenagers and there's dysfunction is that the parents have been bought into this belief that home needs to be the happiest place on earth, that they're trying desperately to be miniature Walt Disneys. Mm-hmm. And make sure that their kid's never bored. Well, we know that if your child isn't bored, it inhibits their ability to develop imagination. So we don't want our child to be bored. We don't want them to be wet and cold. We rush to them with a towel.
But you're saying they need to be bored to develop imagination?
Yes.
I want to underline that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A lot of these things we could spend the whole hour talking about, but that's a huge deal. There's a book that actually says if your child is bored, stop what you're doing and run through a series of options that they could choose from. And the idea seems intuitively correct that you're teaching your child to make choices. But the problem with that is that it also teaches the child that the adults in their lives exist to make and keep them happy, which is not true. It shouldn't be true. When I was a kid, I remember if I ever said I was bored, my mother didn't say, well, let me stop what I'm doing and make life about you. She said, if you're bored, it's because you're boring. Now get out of this house, go find something to do, or I'll find you something that you're not going to like. And I never walked away like, you damaged my fragile self-esteem. I just went outside and played, and then I had to figure it out.
That gets to the issue of trust, too. If you give your child options, it shows that you don't trust them to come up with something on their own. Yeah,
and I think we can overthink this, but I think you're absolutely right with this, is that our kids are resilient, they're smart, their brains, as they approach and move through puberty, are growing tremendously. Their worldview is developing, and their need for autonomy is exploding inside of them. There's a lot going on inside of them, and so we don't have to cater to them as much as we think we do.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. You might say all kinds of stuff when things go wrong, but these are the words you really need to remember. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. They've got options to fit your unique insurance needs, meaning you can talk to your agent to choose the coverage you need, have coverage options to protect the things you value most, file a claim right on the State Farm mobile app, and even reach a real person when you need to talk to someone. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Pro Savings Days are back at Lowe's with limited time savings on the supplies pros need. Get up to 40% off select major appliances. Plus, save an additional $100 on every $1,000 you spend on select major appliances. And don't miss your chance to activate and earn 3 times the points on select DeWalt and Klein tools. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 3/28. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. See associate or Lowe's.com for more details on qualifying items.
I'm talking with former teacher Tyler Durman. He has used the insights he learned from years talking to teens and pivoted to coaching parents about the surprising things that teens need from their parents. The things he shares are often counterintuitive. In fact, I said that's the name of his book. Teens want a relationship with their parents more than we think. They spend a lot of their time with their friends and a lot of their energy managing their peer relationships. But they still need and want the adults in their life to listen to them and to sort of fence them in. They want the security of having a protected yard to play in, so to speak, but they want gates in their fence too. They want to venture outside the boundaries, but they want their parents to be there. The relationship with your teenager or preteen child is really complicated. They want autonomy and freedom, but they still need us. Tyler explains some of their other needs.
A part of the foundation that they need, which I've learned from teenagers, is this notion that they want to respect us more than they want to like us. And if we're desperately trying to get them to be happy with us, to like us, they see that as weakness and they lose respect for us. And watch this. And if they don't respect us, they won't want to be close to us. They won't like us. They'll just see us as props in their lives they need to manipulate to get what they want. It won't be a thing of intimacy. Our connection with our kids is really built on the fact that we are not their peer, but we're their parent. And when we're running around trying to make them happy all the time, we're sending a message, I'm not okay if you're not okay, which doesn't make them feel safe. And to your point, it makes them feel like, well, I've got to depend on this adult to keep me happy, and instead of, I'll figure it out.
I don't know which is the best way to discuss this. You tell me, is it better to think about developing respect from your child in terms of like, what have we done wrong that makes them lose our respect? Or what can we do to earn their respect or maintain their respect?
By talking about what we can do to earn their respect, it highlights some of the things that we've habitually done that loses their respect. For example, we talk about this mindset of seeing yourself through the eyes of what their needs are, right? So if we can understand they need to respect us more than like us, that informs how we relate to them in moments when they don't like us. It informs us that when we say something, we need to do our best to follow through with what we've said is important to us. This is one of the foundational things that I find kids complain about is like, in fact, I had a kid yesterday from North Carolina that I was coaching his dad and now I'm working with him. And he said, that's just my dad making noise. I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, he'll come up with this moment where he's trying to be super dad and he'll make these big statements, but it doesn't mean anything. He's not going to follow through. And so you sit there and you look through the eyes of the kid and you realize, wow, that's why we talk about consistency being so important. But none of us can be totally consistent. And I had a mom, after I spoke once to a group of parents, came up to me. She waited in line, signed the book, wanted me to sign the book, makes me feel really important.
Right.
But the real reason she's there is because she wants to ask a question. And she said, Tyler, you were talking about disrespect and how we should respond to it. She said, if I responded to every time my kids disrespected me, that's all I would be doing. I'd be exhausted. I said, at first, that's true. You would be, because if you take a stand on issues of respect, they're going to test you. And that's a huge thing I'd love to talk to you about in a moment, is this notion of testing.
So it just snowballs. Okay.
Yeah. And so they're going to test you. But in the long run, if they know where the boundaries are, if they know that it's not okay to be disrespectful to you or their peers, and they test that and they find out you really mean that, your life gets so much easier in the end because they feel safe. I'm glad this came up because I really wanted to talk about this aspect, because your big question is here, what do our kids need and how do we build trust with them? And it really comes down to the point of testing. So if you say disrespect is no longer okay, I can't roll my eyes at you and go, whatever, and walk out of the room, then I'm going to test that. Because if you've been inconsistent in the past, the only way I know if you mean it now is to push against it. And when I push against it, that's when I'll discover, am I safe with this person to really trust what they say? You know, I always say to parents that teenagers are like barbecue chicken.
What?
Yeah, that's all I got for you, Wendy.
Okay.
Thank you for having me today. No, here's the follow-up to that. Teenagers are like barbecue chicken. Just because they look done on the outside doesn't mean they're done on the inside. And they have lingering childhood needs that will not go away until their frontal lobe stops growing in their mid to late 20s. And the greatest felt need that I hear from teenagers and preteens is their need to feel safe. Can I count on the adults in my life to be stronger than me? I sat next to a kid named Josiah early in my career. This is the first time I documented anything I was learning from kids because I was so surprised. He was a student body vice president at a school in Orange County, California. Impressive kid. He'd set the whole thing up, introduced me. It was just, I thought he was as adult as I was. He knew more about political science than I do. He wore deodorant. I thought, this kid's done, you know. Mm-hmm. Afterwards, he stood at the end of the line. I talked to a bunch of students. He said, "Can I talk to you too?" Top of the bleachers, we sat shoulder to shoulder. And he said, "My dad doesn't love me." And I said, "What do you mean?" And that's when the first tear fell. He was leaning forward on his knees and he quickly wiped it away. And he said, "Well, here's the thing." And this is what I kept repeating in my brain because I didn't want to forget his exact words because it blew me away. He said, "Here's the thing. He lets me get away with pretty much everything. He buys me whatever I want. He never disciplines me." And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, you wouldn't expect a 17-year-old boy to be saying, "I want more discipline." What Josiah was saying is, I measure the depth of my dad's love for me by his willingness to be stronger than me, to be over me, to care more about other things than my immediate happiness with him. The dad was doing everything he could to be close to his son in the only ways he knew, but he didn't recognize that he was coming across as a peer. So when our kids push against the boundaries we've set up, the things we say are important, the values we put out there, and they push against it, they're not pushing because they hope to win. I mean, sure, that girl wants to wear that shirt that she shouldn't wear to school because it's the ticket to popularity in the fragile world of her peers, right? She wants that. But ultimately, what she has a deeper need, and that is this need to feel safe. So when my mom says, "You can't wear that to school," and I push against it and go to wear it anyway, whatever, and I walk out and go to school wearing that top, if there's no follow-up to that, then I've just proven to myself that I'm stronger than my mom. If there's no discussion afterwards or consequence or whatever.
Next time I talk to Tyler, we talk about that whatever. Tyler explains how you can respond when your kids push against your rules or your boundaries. And you're going to find out what his simple plantation house in Hawaii taught him about parenting a teen. That's on my next episode with Tyler Durman. You can contact him for one-on-one coaching or learn about his masterclass at hopeforparents.com, HOPEFORPARENTS.com. The link to his website and his book, Counterintutive, are in the show notes. For more from the Pediatrician Next Door, find me on the web at pediatriciannextdoorpodcast.com. If you've got a question about the weird things kids do, send an email to hello@pediatriciannextdoorpodcast.com for a chance to hear your voice on the show. I'm Dr. Wendy Hunter, and I'm the pediatrician next door. This show is produced by Red Rock Music. Make sure to subscribe and leave a review wherever it is you're listening. I'll be back next time with more.